Hello and welcome to Dr. Bingo Fairmont's Management Minute. Dr. Fairmont is lecturing his students about the importance of being on time, so he couldn't be here today. So in his place, it's me, Dr. Adam Shoemaker, here to represent, coming to you live from St. Leo University's Donald R. Tapias School of Business, along with my sound engineer, Sean Soundman Gibbons. So my question for you today is, have you ever had a boss who wasn't so nice, that caused the employees' morale to be low or to hurt the morale? And speaking for myself, yes, I've had all kinds of bosses, some of them great, some of them not so great. Whether they knew it or not, whether it was intentional or not, I can't say, or it was just part of their personality, or they intended it to make things better for the company, maybe misguidedly so. Sean, how about you? Have you ever had a boss who really just wasn't so nice, or maybe just to put it bluntly, mean?
Yeah, I worked retail for about 3 years, and the bosses there would pretty much rotate every 3 to 6 months, pretty much like on a cycle. And I've had some really great managers, and I've also had some not so nice managers that just kind of take things for granted.
Do you think that they left or they were asked to leave after that 3 to 6 months because they were mean bosses, or was it just that they weren't happy where they were and that was kind of what contributed to them being mean?
I think it's a mixture of both, really. It's from a previous bad experience with the company that kind of just drags on, or maybe it's like some sort of like superiority complex where they're like, oh, I'm a manager of X, so you need to do XYZ because those aren't my tasks.
You are my disciple.
Essentially.
Yes, I understand. So you brought up maybe one of the most famous CEOs of all time, and that is
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, of course. But even though he's world famous, of course he was maybe one of the greatest of all time. He made Apple what it is today, or was a big part of what made Apple what it is today. It turns out he was kind of a jerk.
Oh, more than that.
And a lot of employees didn't like him. There was lots of cases, documented cases of him losing his temper, yelling at employees, mistreating people. He told his HR personnel that, quote, they have a mediocre mentality, which may be true, but isn't very constructive in terms of doing better from a performance perspective. And obviously this isn't something that's going to be a great strategy for a boss in the long run. It's going to burn the employees out. It's going to create lower morale for the organization. Employees are going to leave. Productivity is going to suffer. But on the other hand, if you look at Apple as an example, Steve Jobs left. They went into millions of dollars in debt. And when Steve Jobs came back, he turned it around in a very short amount of time. So what makes sense? Is it okay to be mean if you're making a profit for the organization? Is it better to be nice, and does that actually lead to profit? Let's talk about this today in our episode on Don't Be Mean. So, Sean, do you think there are any real advantages to this kind of mean management style, short run or long run? Is this something that's going to help the company, or is this really something that's the company might succeed in spite of?
Well, in the short run, it creates a sense of fear or a sense of urgency to get stuff done because the consequences seem much larger when someone is mean because they don't want them to go off on them.
Right, understandable. And I know that in today's modern world with social media everywhere, it's so easy for an employee to kind of report on that. Where before you swallowed your pride and you grin and bear it, nowadays you go to social media, you complain about the company, and that can have a direct negative effect on the organization.
It's so easy right now to reach out to company PR. Most of them are actually on Twitter and Facebook and all the sites that we use. It's as simple as doing the little @ sign and then saying, for example, you could do at Apple. It's like, Tim Cook, who's the current CEO of Apple, he's like, oh, he's so mean and he's making us work 40-hour days, something ridiculous like that. He's like, he's making us sleep in the Cupertino headquarters.
And not even in the nap pods, no!
Yeah, no nap pods. He drank all the coffee in front of us and said we got to stay up and work on the latest version of iOS, Something like that, something crazy.
And it's strange because this whole trend, the Steve Jobs phenomenon, is catching, right? There was a lot of the culture at Uber, the culture at Amazon for a little while said, hey, we want this toxic workplace. We want a bruising workplace where people are going to be stressed out and that's going to make them work harder. I don't know that there's a lot of evidence to back that up, but certainly Bezos and Kalanick thought that was the case. So anyway, one of the other things to think about is there is some clear research that shows, and this comes from a Quartz article that you shared with me. So there's a lot of actual research that shows, and this comes from a Quartz article that you shared with me by Christer Ungebøk from 2017, and it showed that there's all kinds of negative consequences that come from having a mean boss, right? That it decreases employee motivation, it decreases creativity, it changes their behavior, and it comes to all these bad outcomes such as depression, substance abuse, potentially workplace violence, and certainly recidivism, where employees aren't even working as hard or not working as well, and maybe leaving the organization, and that's not a healthy way to be. So what can a CEO do to be nice but still be tough on making people get their work done? And one of the things is it's not a great idea to lash out against employees. Just good psychology tells us that if you can give criticism in a constructive way, in a developmental way, it's going to be more effective and more meaningful than just yelling at people. And of course, there's frustration in the workplace. What I've found in my own experience, if I look back, is when I have had a bad boss or a mean boss, it's probably because they're frustrated for one reason or another. Either the boss, him or herself, is not getting what that person needs in terms of resources, or they're overworked and underpaid, or simply burned out and doesn't really want to be in the position that they're in anymore, but doesn't really know what to do about it. Maybe isn't eligible for a promotion and doesn't feel like they have a whole lot of options, so they take that out on the employees. And potentially, it could just be a mean boss, right? Maybe it's a reflection of the company culture, where either meanness is encouraged or it's not discouraged enough. So in other words, can the culture be changed to make sure that bosses aren't mean anymore, or that that's not rewarded or not at least overlooked? And what's going to need to happen is if you don't change that culture, there might be something that you have to do as an employee, either transfer to a different department or under a different boss, or just leave the company altogether. I think it's pretty telling. If your company has a culture that encourages or doesn't discourage mean bosses, that is not a great company to work for. So what would Dr. Bingo Fairmont say if he was here with us today? Probably the first thing is it's not going to be productive for managers and bosses to be a jerk, right? Generally, if you mistreat your employees, what's going to happen, Sean? They're not going to stay.
No, they're going to leave.
And they're going to go to the competition.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's a concern. It's long run, it's never going to be a viable strategy. Can you get a little bit more work out of them in the short run? Is that sort of the Bezos strategy? Maybe, but it's not going to be a great long-term solution. So be nice, right? Treat the employees as people. You don't have to give them everything they ask for, but certainly find out what you can give them that's going to make them more motivated and more willing to get your work done and help out your organization. But you can still be firm as well. And that means being nice with high expectations. It's not easy to do that, but the important thing is to be consistent with every employee, and make sure that you're trying to do your best by them as a person, but also do your best by the organization. So we'll sign off for today, and our next podcast topic is, can an app really manage people? We're going to take a look at the Uber workplace, which is fraught with conflict in the last couple of years about whether Uber drivers are contractors or employees. Our website for the podcast is managementminutepodcast.wordpress.com. You can follow us on Twitter @Bingo Fairmont and on Facebook, Dr. Bingo Fairmont's Management Minute. Our email is bingofairmont@gmail.com. Thank you to St. Leo University, the Tapia School of Business. Our intro and outro music comes to us from bensound.com. A special shout out to our friend Dr. Russell Clayton, and of course our engineer, researcher, and sometime contributor, Sean Soundman Gibbons. And if you see Dr. Fairmont, please tell him we're looking for him.